We have the privilege of having Fraser McCready on the show again, and today we're going to be discussing everything about his experience in research. So welcome again, and we're excited
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
So, Fraser, you previously mentioned that you had a bunch of different research experiences in undergrad. Could you tell us how they came about and what these different experiences were?
Yeah, I had a pretty tough time with undergrad when I kind of first started out. Um, my first 2 years were pretty rough, and I had a lot of kind of low grades on my transcript. And like I know, like when I started undergrad, like I went into it with the intention that research was always like something I wanted to do. And so I kind of had this moment, I think, near the end of my second year, where I was kind of looking at my transcript and it was like, overall average of maybe 70%. So like, B minus, C plus kind of student. And it was like, this isn't going to get me to the kind of grad programs that I wanted to get into and to do the kind of research that I really wanted to do. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, well, what am I going to do to get out of this kind of mess that I'm in? And so I decided that what I was going to try to do is that, well, if I'm not going to get into the grad programs I want with just my transcript alone, then all I can really do right now is try and make up for that with just research experience. So I decided that I was going to just start applying to basically any kind of lab or research position that I could possibly find. It was the program we have by the federal government here in Canada called the Federal Student Work Experience Program. So I think like I applied to that, and essentially it works. You just like you upload your resume, and then it asks you about like different skills that you might have that you can check off. So you can check off if I've like ever done a PCR assay, or if I know basic molecular biology, microbiology sort of stuff. So I got checked off a bunch of ones that were like biology related, because that was my undergrad degree. And then they basically just send you jobs to apply for that are with the federal government. And so I got a few that were like, secretary kind of work. But then I got one that was for it's like an entomology technician assistant out in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So obviously my background that I was in at that time was like neuroscience and molecular biology, and had no real experience with like ecology related stuff. I applied to it. I went through the interview. It went okay. I got a call back from them saying, sorry, the job went to someone else. So okay, fine. And then I got a call back from them again a couple of days later saying the person they had offered the job to didn't realize the job was in Sault Ste. Marie, and they didn't want to move kind of to Northern Ontario. So they asked if I wanted to take it instead. So I said, sure. And I guess that was kind of my first research experience job that I got into, was with the forestry service there and Environment Canada, I guess. Yeah, so we would kind of drive around to, I guess, different sites in Ontario and kind of monitor tree health from trees that have been, I guess, infected with these invasive insects. We were studying emerald ash borer. So we were kind of doing that. We also had kind of random jobs like kind of organizing different samples of insects that had been collected, sort of measuring the size of insects that had been collected from different sites. So it was very far removed from what I had been trained in, but it was, I guess a good introduction to how research and science works in general, right? How to keep a lab book, things like that. So it did give me some, I guess, interesting experience in that sense. Yeah. And then I guess the following year, or the following summer, I guess I kind of ended up doing the same thing, where I just was like, well, I'll apply to this program again. The experience on Sault Ste. Marie was awesome, getting to kind of trudge around the woods and set up field experiments, and not having to work my horrible food service jobs that I'd always worked before, having to do that. I don't have to go back to Starbucks and the movie theater again. So I applied again to the same program, and this time around got offered to apply to a job that was in Southern Alberta, working with the Department of National Defense. So I applied, ended up getting that. And this time around, the sort of research project I was working on was looking at improved antibiotic countermeasures against potential biothreat agents. So I think specifically it was Bacillus anthracis, or anthrax, as well as another bacteria called Francisella tularensis. And so we were kind of looking at how we could use different combinations of antibiotics to better treat these infections. I also got to do some work there with setting up training exercises for, NATO CBRN teams, so like chemical, biological, radiological specialist forces that were getting trained on how to deal with potential, threats like that. So one of the things that had me doing was like making props for the fake like anthrax terrorist lab scenario that we were setting up for them to go into. So it was a really awesome experience getting to kind of go out there and get some really cool research experience over that summer, and being able to kind of go back into my final year of undergrad after that and apply for research projects, and already kind of having some research under my belt.
It sounds like you were able to apply these super different experiences to your current research as well, even though they were super unrelated. Do you have any advice for any undergrads who maybe are going through the same boat that you were going through in second year with maybe lower grades, stuff like that?
I guess, my main piece of advice, or just something to say, is that you don't give up. Like you can still get to where you need to go, even if you've kind of messed up your first year or second year. I think what sort of things that I ended up doing was, in addition to, starting to try and find these other research experiences, one of the things I did was start taking 4 courses a semester instead of 5. I understand if you're an international student, that's kind of more difficult because it means taking an extra year, and that's a lot of tuition for some people. But in my case, it was the difference between really, really struggling to get by with like 70s, and being able to actually engage with the content that I was learning more deeply and actually like enjoy it and end up getting like 80s in the courses instead. So for me, I think that was a really big thing. I guess my other piece of advice is, and sort of one of the things that I realized was, like, you're kind of allowed to screw up a certain number of courses throughout your undergrad career, right? And it's expected. So for me, it was kind of this realization of like, all right, I've kind of used all my get out of jail free cards, and I really need to focus now on making sure that I do well in all of these courses that I'm taking now, because one of the things that you're always going to be trying to prove to people now is that I've changed, right? Like this is a bad couple of years, but things are different now. And so one of the ways that you show that is just by saying like, yeah, look, my first couple of years were rough, but in my third and fourth year, and in my case, fifth year, I really turned around and finished strong. And so that, combined with, I think, having a lot of good reference letters from the people that I had worked for, ended up making a big difference for me in terms of getting into graduate school. I will say it is tough. I think it does kind of follow you for a bit, in that, like, even after getting into graduate school, when it comes to applying for studentships and stuff, it's sometimes hard to explain those grades away. But ultimately, I think people are generally pretty receptive to honesty and saying, yeah, this is something that I really struggled with, and here are all the things that I've done to make up for it. And I think people generally appreciate you being able to show that like you have taken ownership for any kind of mistakes you might have made, and that you've like actively done things to try and make up for it, right? So I think like that's something to always kind of be keeping in mind if you are in that situation, is like, what am I doing now so that I can be able to show people later that things are different.
Good to hear that from a grad student, because I think a lot of people our age, like or younger, they tend to think that grades are the only thing that matters. So it's good to see that your actual experiences also matter a lot.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I think like people are very hesitant to admit that maybe like they have found themselves in these situations. We always kind of want to portray ourselves as having this like very clear and straightforward path to where we are now, kind of. And for a lot of people, that's just not the case. So I always try to be very, I guess, honest about that, right? And say that like, yeah, like I really struggled, and things weren't easy for me, but you can still kind of make it to, the places that you're trying to go, if you work hard at it. I guess to kind of drive the point home that like you should still be open to different research experiences, even if it isn't exactly the field that you want to be going into. I was working in technically like a microbiology lab, but we were studying how these microbes infect human cells. So I was doing human cell culture at the same time, which is like a big part of the research that I do now, and a big part of like the research I did in undergrad. So I was able to kind of go to, different professors who are doing more like neuroscience related stuff and say, hey, like I've already done human cell culture, which is a pretty big thing to have under your belt at that time in undergrad. So yeah, I guess I had to kind of find a fourth year research project supervisor. And I had actually found someone through, I guess our department had organized like a pub night thing where it's like students and professors are supposed to mix and talk. And so I ended up talking to someone there named John Vesey, who was a new professor. He used to be a postdoc at SickKids, where I'm working now, actually. So he's pretty familiar with our program. And he was doing research looking at, I guess, how certain processes within neural stem cells determine whether, when that cell divides, whether the daughter cells are going to become neurons or whether they're going to stay precursor cells. So he's working with neural stem cells that way. And I kind of explained my situation to him, where I said, look, like I'm really interested in your research. It sounds, super cool. I'd like to do my project in your lab. But then I kind of explained to him like my own situation with, my kind of rough start to undergrad. And so I said, look, I know I have to give you my transcript to apply to this, research project course. I just want to give you a heads up on like what's going on. And he was actually really great. Like he actually shared with me that he had, I guess, been in like a very similar situation with his own undergrad. He said, yeah, like, his undergrad, like, I guess guidance counselor, just that they are in undergrad. Yeah. I told him like, you have no business being in science, basically. And now he's a professor, right? So he was very much, on board with the fact that sometimes, you can have kind of poor grades and still be interested and dedicated to what, you're researching. So yeah, I did my undergrad project with him, kind of looking at how certain RNA binding proteins might be impacting how these cell fate decisions are made. And it was really awesome getting to work in the lab of a very new professor, because at that point there weren't very many students, like graduate students, in the lab. And so even as just like an undergraduate student, it was kind of like, okay, just take on one of these projects in the lab and it's just yours, right? Whereas I know a lot of undergraduate project students that I've talked to who've had like different experiences at different universities. It's normally like you're kind of just helping a graduate student with their own project, and kind of like helping them run some experiments, and which is great. But I think the experience of being in a small lab like that was really awesome because, you know, I kind of had my own project that I could work on. And because I had taken this 5th year, I think I'd only really needed like an extra semester to graduate. So I just kind of like spread those courses out and got to focus like the majority of my time that year just on research and trying to really make progress with that. Yeah, so it was an awesome experience, and kind of like got me working with, you know, I guess neural stem cells and with that kind of cell culture technique, which kind of led me to the research project and lab that I'm in now for my graduate school education.
For your first experiences with working in a wet lab setting, I mean, with the neural stem cells, would you say your course material helped out with that? Because I'm just wondering how you transitioned from such a non-molecular bio type field to suddenly working with stem cells.
The coursework that I did, I wouldn't say it really, you know, prepared me with everything I needed to know about how to work with these sort of cell cultures. You know, what the coursework really does help you with, though, is when you run into, I guess, problems with your experiments, or trying to like, interpret what's going on when you get your data back, right? And that's sort of somewhere where like I had to play catch up. Like a lot of the techniques that we use in the lab now, people call it like kit biology. So like if I want to do a you know, DNA extraction, there's just like a kit we have in the lab with like a little spin column and like all the instructions. And like you could get by knowing absolutely nothing about how that technique works, and just you follow the step-by-step things, and you know, you get your product at the end. But I've had like one of the postdocs in our lab is always very good at trying to direct students to be like, hey, you need to actually, you know, learn exactly how these kits work, because, you know, when you don't get your nice product at the end and you have to go through and troubleshoot, if you kind of don't know the theory behind it, it can be difficult to know like maybe what went wrong, right? So yeah, I think maybe the flip side of that too is if you're spending more time now like focusing on learning exactly the theory behind this works, you know, that'll be beneficial in the future as well. Whenever we've taken on undergraduate students, at least like that I've worked with, you know, like the student we took on, I guess not this previous summer because of COVID, but the summer before, I don't think had much like experience with the techniques that we were using, and that wasn't really something that we were looking for that much. Like as a graduate student who might be taking on like a summer research student, I'm much more interested in if this undergrad student is actually interested in the research that we're doing, rather than like, oh, they know how to run a Western blot and they've done it before. Because I think like having that interest is just so much more important as to like whether the student is going to be engaged with what it is that you're doing. You know, and if I have to spend an extra week or two training them on how to, you know, do a technique, I'd rather do that than have to be like constantly poking them to, you know, actually be interested in what they're doing, right?
How was it that you found the lab that you're at right now, and what was the application process like?
Yeah, so I only ended up applying to this specific program because even in my kind of last year of undergrad, I think I kind of was waffling about what I wanted to do. I'd gotten interested in engineering through like one of the clubs I had joined in you know, undergrad, where it was like an engineering kind of based club. And so I was like, well, maybe what I'll do is just go back and do a second undergrad in like biomedical engineering, because I already had all the bio courses. I just need the engineering ones. Or do I want to just go into grad school and maybe kind of like, you know, work my way towards kind of like a bioengineering thing? that was kind of my thought process at the time. I was really waffling, and I kind of waffled for long enough that, you know, this program was the only one that still had applications open, but it was like the best program that I wanted to get into. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll just apply to this. And so it was late. I think I probably didn't end up applying until April, I'm going to guess. And so I had to wait until kind of like mid-June to see if I'd gotten in or not. And I actually ended up having to get called in for an admissions interview, which is not, I guess, typical for a program. So I had to go in and talk with a couple of different professors in the department, and they kind of just sat me down. And of course, we're asking like, all right, so you have like good, you know, your CV is good, you have good references, but like we're looking at your transcript and like what happened, right? So, you know, I still had to answer to that. And so I think I was just kind of honest with them. I just said, you know, yeah, like I really kind of didn't do well. I had a hard time adapting. But again, like here are all the things that I've done. Like the reason that I took this job in Sault Ste. Marie and took this job like far away in Alberta was because I wanted to try and make up for this. And, you know, like that's it, right? I can't go back and change, you know, my first year marks. They won't let me. So they also, the other thing that I thankfully had brought with me was a copy of my fourth year undergrad like research, I guess, thesis. And so like one of the professors asked me like if I had brought a writing sample with me, and so I was able to kind of show that to them, and they had looked through and said, okay, like that's fine. And so I ended up getting admitted to the department that way. As for how I found an actual lab, it's again going to be different depending on what program you apply to. Our program in Mogen does rotations. So I think, you know, near the end of the summer, I basically ranked like my top 3 choices for labs that I was interested in joining, and they kind of just like assign you to one, and you work in that lab for 3 or 4 weeks. And then as you're kind of working that lab, you're supposed to be emailing other professors that like you're interested in potentially working for and setting up a second rotation. And then you set up a third. And after you've kind of done these 3-4 week rotations in different labs, you kind of have to talk to different professors that you've rotated with and kind of arrange like what lab you're going to end up working in. Sometimes it's competitive. Like some people want to get into labs and they end up, you know, not having enough space. Some people are lucky. It's just like the lab has maybe is new and has a lot of open spaces. So yeah, I rotated through 3 different labs before the third lab I ended up rotating in was the one I'm in now. And you know, I think like as soon as I kind of started rotating, I was like, okay, this is awesome. It's, you know, stem cell research, it's neuroscience, you know, the project sounded really interesting. And so I thankfully ended up getting accepted into it, I guess. Yeah. But it was a really good experience, I think, doing those rotations, because it allows you to kind of try out different labs before you commit to the 6.5 year PhD there, or even if you're doing a master's, you know, 2.5 years. It allows you to kind of feel out the lab culture, which I think is very, very important, and is something that you can't find out just by reading bios and papers online, right? Like what it's like to actually work in that lab. What are the people like? What are the expectations for work hours, and I guess yeah, like socializing while you're there. You know, I think I had one of the rotations I did, it was like very clear that the lab was very, very strict about, you know, when you need to be at work, what kind of, like, people wouldn't talk about things that weren't work related while they were in the lab, right? It was very, very intense. And like they do amazing research and publish really, really great papers. And like if that's something that you really want to go into, it's like, all right, you know, I'm here to work hard for 6 years, you know, publish really well and do well. But for me, it was like, well, you know, I want to publish well and do well, but if it's going to come at the cost of me being able to like talk to people about my weekend at work. It just wasn't the right kind of environment for me, right? So yeah, it was definitely like a worthwhile experience to be able to do that.
I feel like our whole chat today was filled with a lot of good advice and tips for us. But for our last couple minutes, do you have anything that you wish you knew before taking on research as a career?
I'm lucky in that, like, I have a couple older siblings who've done like PhDs, and so they kind of warned me back in high school when I wanted to about like the what to expect. I don't think I really listened to them, but I knew a bit about it. But I think my I guess things that I would tell people who are interested in doing this is, one of the things I think people struggle with sometimes is how often you are going to be wrong about, your ideas, and how often things are just not going to work. It's just expected, right? Like, I think one of the postdocs actually in my fourth year undergrad project lab, like, I was upset because something didn't work, and they just said, science is just like getting everything there is to be wrong about an experiment wrong until like you've run out of things to do wrong, and then it works, right? Like, which, I mean, maybe isn't entirely true, but I think people sometimes have a difficult time sometimes understanding that, like, there isn't an answer to the question that you're asking yet, right? You can't just look up what the answer is to whatever my specific research project is. You have to do the work and find it, right? And oftentimes things just don't work, and you have to change directions. And maybe you talk to your other friends in your program, and you're like, oh my God, like, none of my experiments are working. I feel like everything's failing. I'm just like, this is awful. And then they're like, yeah, everything's failing for me too. It's fine. It's just expected. Like, I think, one of the things, actually, one of the postdocs in our lab told me was, like, most people don't get their final thesis data until like the last couple of years of their program. Everything else before that is just troubleshooting and really trying to, like, nail things down. So yeah, I think if you're going into graduate school, know that a lot of things aren't going to work, and that's fine, and that's normal. And it's, like, actually kind of an important part of the scientific process, is finding out, like, what doesn't work, right? So yeah, I think that's my piece of advice.